I'll call the meeting to order here, and now I'd like to acknowledge we are on Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Can I get a motion to approve our agenda? I see Councillor Sanford and Councillor Mosier seconding. All in favor? Any omissions, deleting? Up? Great, good. Okay, good stuff. Looks like we're unanimous there. All right. Item 4, Audit Committee's September 17th, 2020 meetings for information only. I think we've all the opportunity to have a look at that. Does anyone got any questions about that at all? No? Okay, seeing none. New business, number 5, arising from minutes or unfinished business, we have none. So new business, line number 6, our municipal audit process. And we've got Michael here, I believe, is going to give us an overview on our process here. So I think I'll just turn it over to you. Oh, you need to turn your mic on.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for having us today. I think all of you know me, but maybe not. I'm Michael Beliveau. I'm a partner at Beliveau Vino. We call it what we consider the senior auditor on this file. The partner on the file would be Paul Beliveau, and then I also have Luke Richardson, a CPA who works on the file with myself. And we haven't quite worked out all the details this year, but generally there's another generally CPA student who will work on the audit with us as well when we're there. So if we could just flip to the next slide, please. So this meeting is relatively new to the municipal audit process. I think it was probably 2 years ago, it was kind of implemented to have the audit committee, to have a non-counselor on the audit committee, and that the council would meet, or the audit committee may meet a minimum of twice a year. So generally, going forward, the procedure will be what we call a pre-audit meeting, which is our meeting today. And then when we present the financial statements in our auditor report, at that point would be generally your second meeting. You can have more, but those are kind of the standard. And then if there are meetings required beyond that, then you can have them. As I go through this, please interrupt. Ask your questions. I'm happy to stop and at any point in this and answer any questions or concerns that you may have, or if it's even just a comment that you have, please feel free to jump in. So the audit timing this year. So Kathleen, Lisa, and I have kind of decided we'll be hopefully in to do our field work on July 12th, the week of July 12th, and the week of July 19th. We expect it to be, somewhere 8 to 10 working days. I think 8 is what is scheduled in right now. And like I said, it'll be myself and Luke and potentially another doing the actual audit field work. And the plan currently is to be on site following, all appropriate COVID-19 protocols, and knowing it's kind of a month away, those protocols may change. So we're keeping up to date on them, and as we need to adjust, we will. The audit fee for the current year, so for this upcoming year, will be $20,000. That's been agreed upon with the audit committee and council and us. Sometimes throughout the year, there may be an additional charges that are outside of the the audit engagement. For the town, that generally happens to be, for the most part, HST questions or issues that pop up throughout the year. So you may see, on a bill reference to stuff outside of the audit. So that's what you would be seeing there. And the deadline for the completion and approval of the financial statements and the submission to the province would be September 30th of 2021. So that would be for your March year end. Historically, we've never had issues as far as meeting those deadlines from our end or from management's end. We've always been well ahead of the game. Sometimes it may mean the approval comes, I think this year it's September 20th that you have or 23rd that you have maybe already in the schedule. Generally, the statements and all of our work is kind of, done early September at latest. We would be finalized. Then it's just a matter of getting to the meeting time. Next slide, please. So one key thing for you to recognize as the audit committee, from an audit perspective, the approach we take is a risk-based approach. So we look at the operations of the town and decide, where are the areas of high risk. And so from there we say, okay, now what procedures do we need to do to bring that risk down to an appropriate level? And that appropriate level is this idea of materiality. So materiality is what we use to kind of guide what is important and what would matter to a decision maker of the financial statements. So for the town, we break it out into kind of 4 of your non-consolidated funds. So your operating, your electric, and your water, and your cemetery fund. So we look at those each individually, and then we bring them together on a consolidated basis. So within each fund, we set a level of materiality. They're based on various factors. They could be based on revenues, assets, net income, what have you. So you can see there on the screen that, what the numbers that we're using. And those numbers, like I said, are reference to, what would alter a decision that a user of these financial statements who's relying on them, what would impact that decision. So that's the overall number. We actually test down below that number. But, that's kind of when we're referring to these statements being materially correct, though, that's what we're referring to. Just so in order to, if the materiality was $1, it wouldn't, the cost benefit to that wouldn't be cost effective for the town. The cost of your audit would have to be astronomical, because it involves us looking at every single transaction that has taken place during the year, which just doesn't make sense from an operational, cost, or benefit perspective. Next slide, please. So this being kind of your first year going through the audit as council and as an audit committee, I just wanted to touch base on, what are the responsibilities of everybody involved when it comes to the audit. So I've kind of broken it down to management, council, and then the next slide would be the auditor's responsibility. So as far as management goes, at the end of the day, management is responsible for the preparation of the accounting records. So that would be what Lisa, Kathleen, and their team are putting together, and the financial statements. So they, everything that we look at as an auditor, we're actually just looking mainly at the documents provided by Lisa and her team. So, just using for an example, for, the bank balances and the bank reconciliation. So at the end of the year, they tell us, there's X dollars in the bank. So we have a couple avenues, to look there, but at the general, that means them providing us with the copy of the bank statement, a copy of their bank reconciliations, and then we can use that to further do our audit procedures that we deem appropriate for the situation. So similar to any accruals, which would be if your payroll falls on the 25th of the month, and then you have so the next payroll ends on the 15th or the 10th of the following month, they actually have to do the calculation to accrue those wages for those 5 days or 6 days in March that haven't really been on a cash basis recorded. So they would do the calculation, and then from an audit perspective, we would say, okay, you've done the calculations, now show us your supporting documents for why that number is reasonable. And then we can look at it from there. And then also their management's responsible for the preparation of the financial statements. So that's, the final product that you see has been, effectively put together by Lisa and Kathleen. We work together to make sure, we're meeting all the accounting standards and all the notes that are appropriately in there. But, from an audit, we're just kind of looking at the numbers and the content of the statements, as opposed to actually, putting them together per se. They're yours at the end of the day. What's the auditors and the financial statements? The the engagement, the audit report is really what's ours when it comes to it. So as an audit committee and council, your responsibility, you're responsible to the taxpayers at the end of the day. And as a result of that, it's your requirement. You're required to review the financial statements, review the internal control and management letter. And also you have the overall responsibility of within your organization, identifying areas that you may, think are high risk, or maybe the necessary controls aren't in place. And that's where this audit committee can be used, where you can actually tell the auditor, this is an area of concern for myself or for the audit committee or for council. And so we can react appropriately to it to say, okay, that's something we need to look at this year, and we can develop procedures to address potential issues there, because you as council and the audit committee are in a position where you're not active in the day-to-day operations, but you would have a better day-to-day operation access than I would as the auditor, where I'm kind of in and out to do our work there. So we take direction from the audit committee as well, not just our own review of the controls, etc. Next slide, please. So I did touch briefly on, the auditor's responsibility, and we're issuing an opinion on the financial statements at the end of the year. So kind of the stuff that we're looking at. So the procedures, and I touched briefly on, the procedures as far as the bank statements go. So the bank statement, we would have a copy of the bank reconciliation. We have the option of confirming. So the town sends a letter to the bank, which the bank then directly sends to us to confirm, yes, this was the amount of money in the bank at March 31st of 2021. Obviously, with checks coming in and out and deposits, that's not really the balance showing on your financial statements at that point in time. So from there, we would take the list of outstanding checks and outstanding deposits provided by Lisa and Kathleen, and we may sample or select or review them for, old and outdated checks. Or for large checks, we actually will say, okay, there's an outstanding check for $25,000. We'll actually go to April and see that clear the bank to make sure that the check is valid, and review the check itself for two authorized signing authorities on the check, who it was written to, and kind of those pieces. So those are the type of procedures we do. Another piece for your information would be, payables, for example. There's kind of two levels of risks when it comes to payables. It's either the payable exists, so we want to test to make sure it actually is a liability of the company, of the town, or maybe it's a liability on your books that doesn't exist. So there's different avenues to testing those two approaches. So from an audit perspective, one way is, we'll go through your payable files, and we'll pull an invoice from some supplier, and we'll actually trace that back through to it being paid. So we'll say, okay, here's the invoice, and let's go and see how this was paid, and see the check actually clearing to that company. And then the other direction is, okay, we have a check coming from the town to this supplier. Now we want to go back and actually see the invoice that relate to, and we follow it through in conjunction with the procedures that are in place. So if there's supposed to be a purchase order attached to the invoice, we look at that. Is the invoice approved? Are the checks signed? So we go through all those stages. So that's kind of the type of work that we're looking at. And then from a financial statements perspective, we want to make sure that they're in compliance with PSAB, which is the accounting framework that they're required to. So if we do that in conjunction with Lisa and Kathleen, there will be some significant changes coming, but those have been delayed due to COVID. So I think now it'll be 2 years from now, you'll actually see a change in what the statements actually look like. So that's a down the road piece. They should be pretty similar this year to what they were last year. You'll have, changes in notes here or there, but nothing significantly changed. And then also we're required to look at internal controls. And when we look at these internal controls, we also, within that, if we identify any weaknesses, we would bring it to your attention as an audit committee. And generally we provide a recommendation of how to make that control better. Within that internal control document, management has an opportunity to respond. So you would see kind of our blurb at the front saying, this is a control we perceive to be weak, and this is why we recommend you do X, Y, and Z. And then the management can actually respond to, maybe we don't agree that that's an issue and this is why, or we've already implemented a change and this is the new procedure in place. Next slide, please. So for this year's audit, I just wanted to kind of bring to attention, where we've identified as potential, not necessarily risks, but areas of potential focus just due to the circumstances. And these change year to year depending on what's going on. So clearly one of them would be, with COVID-19, it's, created changes in your operations that, people working from home, virtually, e-payments, e-transfers, anything that's kind of changed the normal way that you would operate. We'll work to identify those areas, and then we'll do work there just to make sure that, the proper procedures are being followed. If you're dealing with confidential information with people working from home, how has that been addressed and what's the control in place, just to make sure everything's in order there. And then another area of note would be, is I'm not sure if you have access to prior year statements, but in prior year statements, there was a subsequent event note or a contingent liability note, note 8, which, with that being in the notes last year and happening subsequent to the March 2020 year end, that'll be something that we'll be looking at this year to see if there's been a resolution to it, or if it would still be a contingent liability, or if it maybe has changed into a liability for the town. So those are kind of the two outside of our normal course of audit work this year that we've identified. And this changes when we get in there, because we may get into our field work, and through that we may identify something else that comes to light, and then we'll pursue it appropriately to make sure that the financial statements are we can provide that unmodified opinion and provide the internal control and kind of complete our duties. I know that was a lot to take in a short period of time, but I'm happy to answer any questions, concerns, or even just open for comments. That's all I have.
That's great. Thank you, Michael. I guess I'll open up the floor to anyone who has any questions. I'll throw one at you. Can you expand on that note 8?
Yes, I can. It was a contingent liability related to the pump station. So that was in the notes. There was, no, at the point in time of last year's audit, there was no resolution to it. There was no way of calculating what a potential liability would be. So this year that'll be an area that we'll want to confirm whether it's still outstanding or whether it's been resolved. If that's clear enough, hopefully.
That's clear. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll open up forward time. Any more questions from anyone? No? Well, Michael, thank you. I appreciate the explainer, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results of the audit process in, what is it, a couple 3 months here, I guess it is, when it gets all said and done. So thanks again. Looks like we're moving on to our next item of new business. 6. Hold on a second now. Oh yeah, we got all that. Okay. Item B, review the Department of Municipal Affairs financial condition indicators. Presentation by Kathy Cox Brown. See that. Do we have a presenter for that? Is someone taking that on?
Mr. Chair, if I may, yeah. I guess I was just going to briefly mention that there is a requirement of our audit committee to review our FCIs annually, but with the presentation by Kathy last November, that had been covered off. And so this is just a bring forward item to have it noted in our audit minutes for ourselves, unless there was a particular question or anything that came up as councils were reviewing that again. I think the session was recorded at the time, and if councilors wanted to watch it again, it's available.
Yeah, I do remember the session. I will open up. Does anyone have any questions about that FCI presentation? No? Okay, well then we will consider that noted.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. With that, it appears we've exhausted our agenda. So our next meeting date is, I see on our meeting here, to be confirmed, but anticipated at September 23rd. So we can all have a lovely summer. I guess at this point, I'll look for a motion to adjourn. All right, well, Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Bertels, and we stand adjourned. See you all later.